Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Don't want anyone parking in front of your house? Okay, Karen, let's see what the cops think about that. After that, my sister doesn't want to free her live-in unpaid maid, so I got her fired. And after that, am I the jerk for refusing to give my child-free eldest a family heirloom and giving it to my second eldest instead? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets kicked out of the HOA. You leave my HOA out of this. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Don't want anyone parking in front of your house? Okay, Karen, let's see what the cops think about that. So when I was around 6 years old, I lived with my family in a nice house in a small city in Poland. It was a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts and pretty much all the neighbors knew each other. There were no sidewalks around the part of the street that I lived on, only one crappy sidewalk that started on the other side in front of my neighbor's house. It's important to remember that the sidewalk was very old and in bad shape. Still to this day, people are asking the city to fix it. This story is about that neighbor, Karen. She was an older lady. Everyone suspected that she really didn't have anything better to do than gossip and disturb everyone trying to rule the street. Everyone was commenting that if you wanted to get the whole area to know something, you had to tell her that message as a secret. Whenever someone came to visit us, they usually parked their car in front of our property. But on bigger meetups, like barbecues or parties, people would park in front of our closest neighbors' houses too. That never was a problem. No gates were obstructed and no one was disturbed. Well, almost. Karen hated when someone parked in front of her house. She would always run out yelling about, "How dare you park your filthy car on my precious sidewalk?" My mother is not someone that lets someone yell at her. She had many discussions with Karen about the laws and rules that stated that she doesn't own anything outside of her fence, which means that the sidewalk is public and anyone can park on it as long as they leave enough space for a wheelchair to pass. That wasn't enough. Every time someone would come to us and park their car there, the yelling would start. Until one time when my mother's friend, Tomek, came for a coffee during winter. He's a local policeman and his specialty is road law. So my mother tells him about Karen and her behavior regarding the sidewalk. Tomek laughs since that thing was in such a bad shape that it can barely even be called a sidewalk. When he was leaving, he assured my mom that he would stop by the next day for a coffee on his lunch break. Next day comes by and I was playing with my brother in the snow. We see a black car pulling over in front of Karen's house, and as the driver gets out, Karen storms out of her house yelling, "You can't park here. This is my sidewalk. Get your filthy car off my property." Well, there he was, Tomek, with his full uniform, hat and all, turning around towards Karen as comically as he could. Tomek, "Excuse me? You tell me that I can't park my car here?" Yes. "But this is a sidewalk open to the public." "Yes, this is my sidewalk." "So let me get this right. This is your sidewalk?" "Yes." "And you are the one responsible for taking care of it?" Karen proudly, "Well, yes, I am. That's why I don't allow anyone to park here." Tomek, "Oh, that's so nice that I found you. So it's your sidewalk. You are responsible for clearing the snow from it to not create danger for the people walking on it. Since it was not plowed, I need to write you a fine for endangering public safety," he says as he pulls out his notebook. "But no other sidewalks are plowed." "Oh, it doesn't matter. The other sidewalks belong to the city. The clearing crew is working on cleaning them. But since this sidewalk is yours, it's your responsibility." "But I'm old. I can't shovel the snow." "Then you need to hire someone to do it. Of course, if the sidewalk happened to be of public property." Yes, it's not mine." "But a moment ago you were yelling at me that it was. So what is it? Is it yours or not? Because I don't know if I should fine you now." "No, it's not." "All right, seems like we cleared that up. Now if you ever harass anyone like you did with me, it could result in a fine. So I recommend you watching out on what you claim to be yours." And then he proceeded to cross the street and enjoy a coffee in our house. Karen never disturbed anyone for parking in front of her house again. She would only stare at people trying to burn holes in their skulls with her sight. My sister doesn't want to free her live-in unpaid maid, so I got her fired. Backstory. Many of you have probably heard stories of families with strong hierarchy structure, normally with the eldest in the family having the most influence. My family is one of them, Except that my parents are deadbeats, so my eldest sister, who's 31, our entitled mother, raised all 5 of us. She's the boss of the family. She says jump, everyone says how high. The focal point of the story is my younger sister, who's 20. We'll call her little sister. Most of us have a handful, or at least a couple of memories with our mother before she lost her crap, except for little sister. For her, entitled mother is the only mom she ever had, and entitled mother knows how to take advantage of that. All of us noped out of our parents' house as soon as we turned 18, except for entitled mother, who waited until little sister and our brother were raised and in their mid-teens to move across the country, and soon found jobs and accommodations for all of us to move to the same state as her. Little sister begged for years to move in with her, but entitled mother always denied, saying that somebody had to take care of our father, and because she and her new husband needed privacy and space. That was until entitled mother got pregnant. She got little sister to move in with her, and she's been there for the past 2.5 years, helping out. Now to the story. Entitled father's family wanted to visit for a couple of weeks, so little sister had to stay with me for that time so they could use her room. It's worth noting that entitled mother didn't ask or let me know about it. She just dropped little sister off. One day, she saw me studying for my master's degree and said something about how she always wanted to go to college, and this is how it went. Me: so why don't you? Little sister: oh, I talked to entitled mother about it, but she said not everyone is the college type and that I wouldn't have time to work, study, and take care of niece at the same time, and it's expensive. Me: most people work and study at the same time, and she can put niece in a daycare. I'm sure it wouldn't be that much more expensive than what she's already paying you. Little sister: she doesn't pay me. She already gives me food and shelter, and if I need money, I just take a shift at work. And this is how I learned my sister was not only babysitting, but also cleaning the whole house for free every day. She was only working 8 hours a week at her normal job because she was too busy taking care of our niece. Long story short, it took me weeks to convince her to apply to community college, and then more weeks on the actual process, but she finally got confirmation she would start in September. All of that behind entitled mother's back. She was planning on telling everyone the next time we all got together, which would be Independence Day. But before that could happen, entitled mother got everyone together at her house to announce that she was pregnant. Little sister starts crying because now she wouldn't be allowed to go to college. Entitled mother gets deeply hurt and offended that she planned this behind her back. I butt in. Our other siblings butt in. It's just generally a mess. How could you do this to me? Who's going to take care of the babies? I can't believe you'd be so selfish. If you like OP so much, go stay with her. These were all some of the things she said. She kicked me and little sister out, who stayed with me until they made peace. Both of our siblings reached out, one to say that I should have minded my own business, and the other to tell me that she was on my side but wouldn't say anything. After that, little sister moved back with her and didn't go to college, but they agreed she would get paid $6 an hour and be allowed to take more shifts at her job until the baby is born, and then go to real college after the kid turns 1 year old. I know it's messed up, but all of them, especially my little sister, worship entitled mother like a god. I waited a year to act on my revenge, making sure my sister had saved up enough money to live on her own. The revenge. First, what I did was research the legality of paying a homeless person in food and shelter. In the US, and depending on the state, it's legal as long as you do not cross the line and the person becomes an employee. For example, you can give the person a list of tasks you want done. However, you cannot say it has to be done in a certain amount of time. You also cannot request someone to be somewhere at a certain time. You can ask, but not demand on the time. It comes down to a choice of words. Also, you have to comply with rental laws. If your local laws say that you must give 30 days notice to a tenant, then you must give 30 days notice to this person as well. I had proof of all of the situation. Several screenshots of entitled mother admitting to not paying and not allowing little sister to move out or get a job, and also admitting to kicking her out whenever she wanted. All this technicality seemed worthless since no one would sue her. But that didn't matter. I just wanted to make sure that her boss knew that if she were to be sued, it would be a sure case. Entitled mother works for a civil rights attorney's office, so discovering she has a literal modern-day slave would probably get her fired. I could have just created a burner email and sent it all to her boss, but then they would explain to her why she's getting fired, and that would get me and little sister in trouble. So what did I do? Entitled mother was always complaining about one of the bosses on her job that hated her and had tried to get her fired for ages. I went to the company's site, found the woman. Thankfully, she was the only Ashley that worked there. Found her on Instagram and Facebook. There, she had a post tagging her yoga studio. Went to said yoga studio and created my membership. It took a few weeks of trial and error trying to find exactly what class Ashley belonged to, but I finally found her. Then I went to yoga class every Tuesday and Friday at 8 a.m. for months, slowly building a friendship with her. Around 3 months in, she asked me to follow her on Instagram, and I was already prepared for this scenario, having deleted the few pictures I had with entitled mother. After 9 months, when our friendship was a strong baby, I brought up the crazy coincidence that I found out she worked with entitled mother. Before things could get awkward, I said, "It's ironic that she works for civil rights, considering, everything." That got Ashley's attention. I told her everything, showed every screenshot. I could practically see her eyes shining. They had their own history that is not important to the story. All you need to know is, entitled mother is a jerk. Ashley wants revenge as much as I do. I told her about little sister's situation and why entitled mother couldn't ever know about this. This is why being friends with Ashley was so important. If I had just sent them the proof and explained the situation, they would have probably just ignored it, since this was a very legitimate reason to fire her, and they wouldn't risk firing her for a minor mistake and maybe getting sued. I sent her the files with her promise that entitled mother wouldn't hear about this, but she needed it to convince the other owner, who was the reason why she wasn't fired yet. 2 months later, entitled mother was fired for her minor mistakes, lateness, and general bad productivity. Small victory, sure, but I loved coming to visit her during the 4 months she was unemployed. She was looking so tired and miserable all the time since she had no money to pay for a babysitter and little sister is away at college, so she actually has to take care of her kids. Am I the jerk for refusing to give my child-free eldest a family heirloom and giving it to my second eldest? I have 2 daughters, which are now grown up. One is 24 and does not plan on having kids, and one is 23 with a 1-year-old daughter and frequently tells me she wants another one day. I'm happy for both of my daughters and support both of them infinitely. However, my great-grandmother has a necklace from roughly the 1880s which her mother had given her and supposedly told her son before she passed she wanted it passed on in the family, which it has been. It was usually given to the eldest. It's now worth quite a bit of money. My eldest daughter and I were talking, in which she expressed interest in inheriting the necklace. When I asked her why she seemed so keen to get it, she started talking about the nice holidays she could have with the money that she wouldn't normally be able to afford. I reminded her it's not to be sold, it's to be passed along the family as a sentimental piece, in which she said she will not be having kids and therefore there will be nobody to pass it to. I suggested that she give it to her niece, in which she shut down, saying it's her necklace and she can do whatever she wants with it. There's no specific family rule saying it belongs to the eldest, that's just how it's traditionally done. So I'm set to give it to my second eldest, who was delighted to keep it as a family heirloom and give it to her daughter. My eldest is furious, claiming that I had promised her the necklace from a young age, which is not true as she was never promised anything, and that I gave it to her sister because she's more traditional and gave me a grandkid. She said that the necklace would have given her a chance to make memories with her partner, which she can't usually afford due to her salary being low, while her sister has more money and wouldn't need it. She said the woman who asked for it to be passed along passed over 100 years ago and isn't alive to miss it. She's refusing to speak to me and her sister for accepting it. The only choice of hers I take issue to is selling the necklace that was supposed to be passed along. I love my daughter, but I believe she's being entitled, but I do not want to lose her over this. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You're not giving it to your older daughter because she's child-free. You're not giving it to her because she's planning to sell it. Very different things. This. And if the person who started it passed a long time ago and their wishes don't matter anymore, the unspoken rule of passing it to the eldest daughter doesn't matter either. So you, as the current owner of the necklace, get to decide what to do with it. She can't have it both ways. If she wants to dismiss the tradition of passing it along, she can't invoke the same tradition to demand it. And you're still alive, so according to her logic, your wish for it to be passed along generations should be respected. Who looks at a 100-year-old family heirloom that's been passed down for generations and thinks, this would make a mighty fine vacation to some far-off locale that I can't normally afford? Not the jerk. Plus, she's likely wrong. Old jewelry is usually not worth that much. I have several antique pieces with diamonds and had them appraised for insurance value. Even though they're all over a century old, none of them are worth more than a few $100s. Unless the piece has huge rocks or belong to someone famous, you're not likely to get much for it. Would I be the jerk if I canceled my daughter's celebratory trip because I need to be somewhere else? I've always promised my daughter that after her final exam results, UK, kids are on their last week, she can finally travel alone and take a holiday with her friends before uni. My daughter and her friends have been planning it for a while, and me and the other girls' parents are funding the trip and are all excited for them to finally travel on their own. They have planned for it to be a week long. But I just found out that my sister will be having her first baby, my nephew, and has invited me to spend the week with her partner, and the baby. And it's the same week my daughter would be away. And I desperately want to be with my sister and spend time with the newborn, but it would mean traveling across the country for a week. Where my sister lives is further into the countryside and often has dodgy reception, so chances are I wouldn't be receiving many calls there. I feel pretty uncomfortable with my daughter being away when I'm not home, because what if she had an emergency and needed me to come get her? I probably wouldn't get her calls, and if I did, I wouldn't be in the right position to plan something for her. Obviously, the ideal situation was for me to be at home, so I could be easily accessible to her. Will I be a huge jerk if I withdraw my daughter from the trip? She's been looking forward to it for years, but my nephew will only be a newborn once, and my daughter has her whole life to travel. Would I be the jerk? I'm very stressed out about this, but I'm pretty sure of my decision to withdraw her. Just want to make sure it won't hurt her. Post-edit. Thank you to the parents and the kids telling me that it would hurt her. I'm still uncomfortable not being home when she's away, so I think I'll just visit my sister another time. Like someone said, my nephew isn't going anywhere. I was putting him over my daughter. Thank you for helping me see this. You're the jerk. Your daughter is traveling alone and is a young adult. Your presence at home is not needed. Just coordinate for your daughter to have a secondary emergency contact if she temporarily can't reach you. I'm assuming that these are high school finals, like the kids are going to college. You really need to not helicopter parent and let your kid just go learn to be an adult. In my opinion, you would be the jerk. I completely understand you wanting to be with your sister and her newborn, but your kid has to take priority. As you've said, they've been planning it for a while and they're traveling on their own. There's no real reason for you to cancel it given that you don't need to be present. You might have bad reception, but you can organize with your daughter who she can call in case of emergency. If there was an emergency at home, you still wouldn't be reachable. Stay home, visit the newborn another week. I'm sure your sister will happily reschedule and the long holidays are only a stone's throw away. I live in a bad reception area in England. The trick? Wi-Fi and WhatsApp. It's not really that difficult to ensure you can get a call, even when traditional signal options are dicey. Family keeps complaining about medical care, so the nurses get family involved in patient care. Patient came in and develops difficulty swallowing, so the poor patient can't eat or swallow without choking and possibly acquiring an infection. Doctors put in a tube in patient's stomach to feed them with liquid food and bypass the esophagus. At first, patient was being fed through a slow drip controlled by a machine. Then family complained that patient wasn't tolerating the continuous feed, so the doctor took the machine away, and now I and the other nurses would have to go in the room 3 times a day to feed patient manually. Family complained the next day that the patient's stomach was bloated, so the doctor changed order to 4 times a day. A nurse would have to go in there to feed the patient. Next day, family complained patient wasn't going to the bathroom after not eating for several days and undergoing a surgery, so that's to be expected. But the doctor caved to the family's complaining and changed the order to every 4 hours. Then family freaked about patient being short of breath and blamed the liquid tube feed, even though the patient has a history of respiratory disorders and is on chronic oxygen. Still, the doctor changed the order to every 3 hours a nurse has to go in and manually feed the patient through the tube in her stomach. I know I was fed up with the family complaining about every tiny little thing, and more so at the doctors for caving in without explaining the reality of the patient's condition. The patient is old as heck and probably won't get better. Family complained again the next day, claimed the patient was having chest pain, red flag for a heart attack, but the family blamed the liquid tube feed. Why? The doctor caved again and changed the order to every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, I, or whoever was taking care of the patient, would have to go in there and spend 20 minutes in the room dealing with the patient and her family. As many people now know, nurses do not have time to mess around. We barely have time to go to the bathroom. So, malicious compliance. This patient is not going to get better, so family needs to know how to feed her through the tube. I educate the family and show them how to do it at 6 p.m. I make sure to turn on all of the lights, turn the TV off, and get the family really involved. They wash their hands, they put on gloves, handle the tube, etc. Then at 8 p.m., I make the patient's son do the tube feed. It takes half an hour, and I can tell he's really freaked out. Then I go back in at 10 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m. By 4 a.m., the son was complaining that I should be the one doing the tube feedings because it's so often. He looks exhausted and terrible. I tell him flatly that it's not rocket science and that he's going to be doing the tube feedings himself at home, by himself with no backup nurse. He takes forever to do the 4 a.m. tube feed because he's so tired. Afterwards, while he's watching me clean up the patient, he comments that the patient seems to be tolerating the tube feeds better, and maybe we can go back to doing it every 3 to 4 hours instead of every 2 hours. I look him dead in his bloodshot eyes and say that when the doctor orders something, then there's no wiggle room. It's literally the law. Because of the family's multiple concerns, it's every 2 hours until the doctor signs a new order and that I'm going to be coming in, flipping all the lights on every 2 hours until I go home. The look of defeat on the son's face was so sweet and almost made the every 2 hours nonsense worth it. Awful post and terrible attitude towards the family. Your issue is with the doctors who aren't managing the family's expectations or ensuring they fully understand the situation. If my family member is in the hospital, I will advocate for them as best as I can. I don't care if it means extra work for the nurses or doctors, if it's in the best interest for the patient. If it isn't, then the doctor needs to explain and discuss that with me. You shouldn't be a nurse. Imagine bragging on Reddit for karma that you did this to a family dealing with a terrible illness of a loved one. You are literally a jerk. Do your job with empathy. This ticks me off. How is this the family's fault? They have no education on this, and now a burnt-out nurse gets upset, so takes it out on the family when it's the issue of the doctor. Yes, you are overworked. Why not educate the family about the reality of it instead of doing this to her son? Good on you. As a Paul care and aged care nurse, I feel your frustration so much. It's so messed up when doctors fail to have realistic conversations with family and let them make ridiculous choices like this. You handled it perfectly. I find it crazy when it's even an option to put a feeding tube in someone at the end of their days. It's cruel and just prolonging the inevitable. Well, what do you think? Is OP a jerk for how she handled this or not? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for effectively making my sister homeless? So I know how that sounds bad, but hear me out. My sister lived with my aunt for 6 years. When my aunt passed 2 years ago, she left the house to my mother instead of my sister, because my sister's never been able to hold down a job and has been evicted 3 times for failure to pay. My mom told her she could continue living in the house, but that she would have to pay the taxes and the homeowner's insurance, about $190 a month, plus the electric bill. Well, about midway through last year, she's yet to pay anything during the month, and came to find out she had never put the electric bill in her name and had rang up almost $3,000 on my aunt's account. So having had enough, my mother gave her 30 days to be out last July. When November rolled around and she still hadn't left, me and my mother went down there. She admitted that she had never told her boyfriend that they were being kicked out and that they hadn't even looked for anywhere to go. Around this time, I offered to buy the house for my mother and that I would just start the process to evict them through the courts. My mother volunteered to just give me the house so I could raise my family in it. It's about 3 times bigger than my current home. It's 3,600 square feet. Well, last month, I filed the unlawful detainer. 2 weeks ago, we had court, and she cried and cried in front of the judge, who ultimately told her that I had the deed, so she has no lease, and upon seeing all of the bills my mother has had to pay to keep the house from being seized, told her to get out within 10 days. Well, yesterday was day 10, and they still haven't packed a single thing, so I filed to have the sheriff's department remove her by force. The department posted on her door that if she wasn't out within 72 hours, she would be charged with trespassing. She and her boyfriend have been texting me almost non-stop, telling me I need to rescind it, because they're going to be homeless, and how could I do this to family? I don't think I'm in the wrong. They've had a year to figure this out. My mother's had to pay their light bill for almost a year because they wouldn't let her just turn the power off because of lockdown. I look at it that every decision she's made in her 35 years of life has led her to this. So, am I wrong? And before people start mentioning it, I don't care if I don't have a relationship with her after this. Things have always been strained between us anyway. Not the jerk. Sounds like your sister and her boyfriend need a serious wake-up call. Sucks that it has to be you to provide it, but honestly, you're doing something that in the long run might end up doing good for her. Not the jerk. There's a very thin line between loving and enabling. It sounds like your sister, who's a grown woman, has been blurring that line and taking advantage of your family's willingness to provide for her for a very long time. She had ample warning. You and your mom gave her every opportunity and plenty of time to find a new place. Every single time, your sister chose instead to continue to test the boundary and see how much longer she could squat. It eventually blew back on her, and she's got no one to blame but herself. I imagine she's had some struggles in her life if this is how she functions, or fails to, as an adult. As sad or unfair as those outside circumstances may be, it's definitely not your problem, and no longer your mom's problem either, to go out of your way to fend for her. Am I the jerk for rejecting my mom's request for my fiance/wife and I to share our home with a stranger? Hope everything's well on your side. I, 30 male, live in the highest COL place in the world. To give some context, everything in New York City looks affordable by comparison. I was gifted the down payment for a home after I proposed to my girlfriend of 6 years, a portion of which I will repay over time. In most families, this would be regular visits, physical labor, helping the family to cover large purchases, etc. Now my mom is angry that I don't want to share my house with a stranger. I'm eternally grateful for the opportunities from my parents and grandparents, great education, steady shelter, and skipping the regular Asian parents' income tax, because my income has been pretty low the past few years. That said, I do cover large purchases at home. My parents can also be incredibly difficult. Both have zero sense of personal boundaries and are hugely controlling. Also, my father has anger issues and plays favorites, to the point he admits it openly, while my mother is the classic type A, demanding, ambitious, often emotional, anxious. The last few years have been especially rough with all the misinformation. I just don't have the strength to deal with them anymore. So when I got a big promotion, plus successfully proposed to my girlfriend of 6 years, she said yes. I was excited to have a legitimate chance to move away without hurting their feelings. Things were even better when they and my grandparents decided to gift me the down payment for my home, though I will need to repay some of it back to them later. The rest of my house will be paid for with my own money and mortgage, even though I did mention I may need temporary aid if something happens to my job, just in case. Here's when trouble arrived. My grandpa recently became ill. He's over 95 years old and needed a live-in nurse. She would sleep during the day and monitor him during the evening, so she needs a bed in a room. My parents' and grandparents' home are already packed with medical stuff, so that is an issue. During conversation with my mom last night, out of nowhere, she joked that it would be perfect for the nurse to live at my place. It was not a joke. I manage a team of 30 people at work, but nothing has prepared me for this. The nurse is a stranger to me, save for a few highs and buys. I'm not prepared to give a stranger, or my parents, free access to the home while we're bone chicken wowing, trying to sleep at night, or working in the office during the day. Am I to install cameras inside my home? How am I even supposed to tell my fiance about this? I asked my mom the above. Her response in the moment of frustration was that I should simply tell my fiance this is happening. Something about how we paid for the house and that she'd be bad wife material if she isn't willing to follow our house rules. My mom also criticized me for being selfish, for not willing to share my apartment with a stranger nurse. I understand the nurse will be a huge help. I really want to help too, but this living arrangement seems crazy. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. The money for the house was not a gift. You have the expectation of paying that back, so it's a loan. You don't owe favors for loans. An alternative is using some of the space in your house to store equipment they don't need at the moment. Not the jerk. This is a big, unreasonable ask. Surely they can clear a room, put stuff in storage perhaps. There are other ways. Your parents sound intrusive and are guilt-tripping you for a loan you are going to repay. Excuse me, why is there an automatic 18% gratuity for parties of 6 or more? Because large parties are an extra burden to bear. Because if one person's section is bogarted by a large party, their night is sink or swim based on your charity. Because the number one reason service staff will have a breakdown or spontaneously quit their job is getting done over on a large bill. Automatic gratuity is there to protect the staff and the business. Cue this one high-maintenance sort and his family of 12. Despite their best efforts to run me ragged, everything went super smooth and genial. Then came the bill. Excuse me, but why is there an 18% gratuity? I'd like to write in my own tip. And you can. There's a line below where you can add whatever you'd like on top of the gratuity, and it's much appreciated. No, no, no. I'm talking about the principal. I always tip above 20%. Big, moment. But having it forced on the customer feels unfair. Me, playing coy. Well, if you wanted to tip above 20%, you can just add the 2% or whatever on the tip line underneath. It's the principal. I just thanked him and walked away. He sat there stewing for 15 minutes while his family was polishing off desserts and gathering their things to leave. A situation best ignored until they leave. And sure enough, he had signed the bill. No extra tip. Shocked Pikachu face. But managed to write out an entire novel on the front and back of his bill, addressed to the owner, detailing why automatic gratuities are the worst thing ever and how much more he would have tipped if it wasn't an imposition. Basically could have just written underneath, "Too long didn't read, I'm a cheap jerk." One of my first service jobs was at a corporate place where the gratuity was conditional on large parties, and at best, you could only ask the party for permission to apply it. Most said sure, fine, but of course. So one night, my entire section is cordoned off for a large party of 20, mostly teenagers, and they did that obnoxious crap like ordering steaks well done, eating half of it, then complaining they want a new one, or asking for extra drinks when I was explicit about no free refills, but still complaining when the bill came, etc. I was gutted because I knew what was coming with the $400 bill. Hey, you guys cool if we add a gratuity? What's that? It's an 18% tip added to the bill to ensure staff, nah, it's cool, we got you. Long sigh and head down in shame. They left me $15. My tip out on the party was $20, and I would never do over the rest of the staff, so I took a net loss of $5 for the night. I was shaking and ready to quit. Managers were all, "Bummer, but it's like that. See you tomorrow." I worked the slow lunch shift the next morning, and as soon as the rush was starting to hit, the general manager comes up to me. "Hey, I'm gonna cut you and send you on break for a couple of hours. I'm gonna need you to come back in tonight." I was so checked out. "No, I'm not scheduled and already have plans. Sorry." His eyes got big. The next morning, I tried clocking in, and the point of sale didn't recognize my number. GM had decided to can me on some trumped-up BS, but it was clearly because I had been insubordinate. Good riddance. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout-out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.